Your brain on hyperreading. Everybody works with the internet in this day and age. Studies have shown that because we work on the internet, we keep getting lured into multitasking. It takes a lot of discipline to stay focused on the task at hand when you are using any form of digital device that is also connected to the internet. Each time we hear a mobile phone or email ping, we reach for our pockets to dig up our phone. That's because our brain delivers a small squirt of dopamine, a highly addictive neurotransmitter that will keep us addicted to this behavior. So can we really answer our emails, binge watch the latest Netflix show and create a knowledge clip on hyperreading at the same time? In this day and age, an ever-growing number of people are prone to use hyperattention and hyperreading. Hyperattention stands for rapid task switching, a desire for a high level of stimulation and a low threshold for boredom. Commercials are becoming shorter, averaging only 15 seconds versus the earlier 30. And movies featuring more action scenes and shorter running times are only two examples of how the world is adapting to this phenomenon. People need to be constantly entertained as to prevent them from becoming bored. When using a lot of hyperattention, these habits of mind can be carried over when it comes to the activity of reading, which subsequently results in hyperreading. Hyperreading was introduced in the late 1990s by James Sosnowski. It's a strategic response to an information-intensive environment, aiming to conserve attention by quickly identifying relevant information. This leads to relatively few portions of a text that are actually being read. Now, let's go back a bit to what we said before about the internet causing us to multitask. There are different opinions about how exactly the internet affects our brain. Nicholas Carr, author of the book What the Internet is Doing to Our Brain, argues that explosive use of searching on the computer coupled with multitasking is making us into shallower people, and he is hardly alone in his concerns. Nowadays we see that students are increasingly busy with sending out tweets, Facebook messages and using WhatsApp, too busy to actually hear what professors are saying in class. In this situation it's quite clear what the main damage will be: points lost on your next exam. But what if the stakes were to be higher? A study on operating room personnel showed that staff personnel was using their mobile phones while performing surgery. Imagine that you are under anesthesia, lying on the table with your doctor playing level 25 of Angry Birds. But there are also people claiming that the internet is actually making us smarter, and that the people who are against the internet are only causing a pointless moral panic. So, having just mentioned some of the downsides, what could be a positive gain from living in this digital age? Professor Susan Greenfield acknowledges that at least one technology might result in cognitive gains. Playing video games can have positive mental outcomes in visual spatial representation and short-term memory, but it can also aid in our ability to track multiple objects simultaneously, which is a form of multitasking. The conclusion of many researchers is that the visual capabilities of television, video games and the internet may develop impressive visual intelligence, but the cause seems to be the deep processing of information. We all think we can multitask. Our assumption is that we can perform as well on all those different multitasking activities at the same time as if we were doing them individually. But even though we hate to burst your bubble, successful multitasking is essentially a myth. But why do we keep doing it? There are two reasons. We are simply very busy people and we want to accomplish several things at once. And secondly, we are bored and our brain seeks novelty. But sadly, our brain can only process so many streams of information at the same time. Studies have shown that only 2.5% of the world's population qualifies as what the researchers called supertaskers. So, is there such a thing as internet addiction? In preparing the 2013 version of the manual DSM-5, there was considerable discussion about whether to include internet use disorder. While the diagnosis did not make the final cut, researchers and even national governments are now talking actively about internet addiction. But is addiction the right word? Maybe it is more like dementia or even digital dementia. Digital dementia refers to people in their late 20s or early 30s who display symptoms such as lack of concentration, memory loss and inability to sleep, all caused by excessive amounts of time spent using digital communication devices. While there are still no international criteria for what constitutes internet addiction or digital dementia among the young, it's likely that any country with inexpensive internet access experiences some level of these problems. But at what exact level do countries and people experience problems? And how will we see hyperreading in 10 years from now? That is the question that we will leave you with to think about. Just make sure you turn off your cell phone first.